And so good afternoon, dear Poland Forum members, Professor Judy Baumann-Schwartz, Director of the Arnold and Leona Finkler Institute of Holocaust Research. Dear guests, I am very happy and excited to open our second year of the Poland Forum activity. I hope that this year we will be able to enlarge our activity and in the future to meet face-to-face in visits or conferences. This academic year will include 5 Zoom meetings. The program was sent to you by email from me, and I hope a conference which, according to COVID situation, will probably take place also by Zoom. Even I wanted very much to make it face-to-face in Poland, but situation is, the situation is we can think about what will happen. I would like to thank especially Professor Judy Baumann-Schwartz for her initiative for this forum and your support. Thank you all for your activity and your efforts to being part of this important forum. I wish all of us a fruitful and healthy year. I would like to invite Professor Judy Baumann-Schwartz, Director, the Arnold and Leona Finkler Institute of Holocaust Research, for opening remarks. Judy, please.
Thank you very much, Leah. So we have 4 countries on the screen represented at once now, which is absolutely marvelous. And I'm so excited to be here. I would be even more excited if I could be in Warsaw at this time, but as you know, travel is not exactly on the agenda for many of us. So Zoom is the next best thing. And I am, as I said, thrilled to open up the first meeting of the Poland Forum and to have our lecture today. Before that, I'd like to tell you about an initiative that we are talking about, Leah and we plan to start, and hopefully many of you will want to be part of it. What we've been doing at the Finkler Institute is, as you know, establishing forums. We have a Poland forum, which you are part of. We have a London forum. We have forums that are geographical. We have forums that are topical. We have the topic of Jews saving Jews. We have the topic of women during the Holocaust, et cetera, et cetera. All in all, we have 10 forums right now. Of those 10 forums, 4 have either put out books or will be putting out books in the next year or 2. And I would like to open an initiative that here, we in the Forum Poland will put out a book of articles of new research having to do with Jews in Poland, either before, during, or after the Holocaust, something that you're working on in your own research. We will send out an email to all members of the forum with more information. We probably will want an abstract from those of you who wish to participate sometime in the spring, probably by April, we'll want an abstract. And then we will go through all of the proposals and we'll see what's suitable for the book. And hopefully we will be able to put together, edit, and eventually publish this book, just like the books that we've put out from our Forum of Jews Saving Jews, our book that we put out last year from Women in the Holocaust. And we're putting out 2 books now, one on literature, Holocaust literature and interpretation, and another one about second generation, which has already come out in English and we're about to put out in Hebrew. So now we're going to have a book from the Poland Forum, and I invite all of you to contribute an essay, an article, a chapter to this book, and first, of course, to send an abstract. So within the next few weeks, Leah and I will be sending out, she and I will be editing this book together. We will be sending you an email to all of the members of the Poland Forum, telling you about this new initiative and inviting you to participate in it and to send us an abstract and eventually an article. I don't want to take up your time. You didn't come to hear me, but to hear our lecturer today. So I give you back the microphone, Leah, and you can introduce our honored, esteemed lecturer. And I look forward to seeing all of you in all of our meetings of the Poland Forum. Thank you all very much for being here.
Thank you very much. And it's always a pleasure to work with you, Professor Judy, because Professor Baumann-Schwartz was my supervisor to my PhD, and it was many years ago. So I'm really very happy that we can work together. So now I would like to introduce our speaker today. Our speaker today is Professor Stefan Landstadt, Poland Forum member and a professor for Holocaust Studies and Jewish Studies at Touro College, Berlin, where he lectures in German's only Holocaust-related MA program. He received several awards and medals for his contribution to German-Polish research and reconciliation. He published articles and books in German, Polish, and English about Second World War, concentration camps, and about the daily lives of German occupiers in Warsaw and Minsk during the years 1939 until 1944. Thank you very much for sharing your lecture with us today. Professor Stefan, the floor is yours. Please.
Thank you, Leah. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm really glad to have this opportunity to speak here. And my topic will be the resistance of Jews against the Holocaust from a European perspective. And I think it's fair to say as the share of Jews from Poland and their share in the resistance is well beyond 50%. So the topic fits right into this Poland Forum. And it's a great opportunity as we have so many experts here. And as I'm presenting a work in progress, I do hope for many insights and tips and good ideas, especially from a conceptual perspective. So I do want to pick some brains here. My book, okay, but let me tell you about this book. As I said, I'm about to write it. I have not yet even started writing it. And I'm writing it for a German audience, a German readership. And in Germany, we have the dominant idea of Jews as passive victims of the Holocaust, as mere objects, as a huge mass being murdered by perpetrators. This is also an effect of the German research on perpetrators and the German focus on the crimes itself. So the Germans identify themselves, like most of the West, with the victims. And yeah, you may find that absurd, but they know very little about the victims to be true, especially because that's not their family history. And what we've seen, it was last shown with the attack on the synagogue in Halle. This was in 2019. We still don't have an idea of Jews being active, being subjects of history, and being like having an agenda on their own. So it's the sheep being led to the slaughter that still dominates. And as you all know, this picture is quite problematic. So of course, during the Holocaust, there were little chances to escape the murder. That's why we have 6 million victims. But on the other hand, we can see that the few opportunities that actually existed were used, and they were sought for, and Jews were very actively engaged in creating possibilities and chances to escape the murder. And you may think of the uprisings, the famous uprisings in the Warsaw Ghetto, in Treblinka, in Sobibór, in Auschwitz. There are many others, of course, but these are the most famous ones. We also have to say that especially the uprising in the Warsaw Ghetto was not a sign of Jewish strength, but quite the contrary, it was a rather symbolic act, something, an uprising just for the reason, especially for the reason to show that Jews are not weak, to show that Jews are strong and that Jews can fight. And this is obviously something that the young insurgents did to compensate their own insecurity, in the sense like Marek Edelman once put it, and he said it's my translation, I'm sorry. He said, it's terribly to go to your death so calmly. It is much more difficult to be this calm than to shoot. And it's so much easier to die when you're shooting. These are Edelman's words. And still, with the occupiers in Warsaw, the Germans in Warsaw, this uprising made quite an impression. And even more so with the Polish, with the Poles living in Warsaw. And I think it's fair to say that their own uprising in 1944 was also inspired by the idea not to fall behind the Jews. So this history of Jewish resistance against the Holocaust, and there is a lot of research, and you know all that, but this history of Jewish resistance is especially necessary in Germany. There is a lot of research, there are overviews, but on the one hand, they either deal with a particular aspect of resistance, or their focus, their main audience is Jews in Israel, in the US. Rarely are these things written for non-Jewish readers, and there is nothing I came across nothing that was written especially for German readers. And then this research or these books are usually written with 6 million victims or with the knowledge of 6 million victims, but this is a perspective that is, it's an after-war perspective, obviously, but this perspective did not, obviously did not, or was not the perspective of at the time. So the rationale of the insurgents, the rationale of resistance is not the knowledge of 6 million victims, but the rationale is that of a persecution, of an ongoing genocide, but not of a genocide that already came to an end with 6 million dead. So active resistance was aimed against many forms of German oppression, not just against the murder itself. So, for instance, there was the idea of protecting religious life. There was the idea of upkeeping cultural life, theaters, obviously schools, and so on, individual liberties, and of course the idea of upkeeping health and one's life. And there were also many tensions, as some of these or many of these goals were actually in conflict with one another. And this is then the discussion inside the ghettos, whether to fight the Germans or whether fighting the Germans means to end life in a ghetto because there will be retaliation. I mean, obviously everything could lead to a deadly retaliation by the Germans, of course, but still what I want to show in my book is that there are no easy or obvious choices, but that every choice you make has potentially deadly consequences for you and for others. And this also means that very rarely did all the people, the inmates of a ghetto or a camp, act coordinated and all together with one unanimous goal. And although they were connected with each other, And even the resistance was connected, and there are all these networks, resistance networks between the youth groups in the ghettos of Poland. But still there is no coordination, there is no central leadership, there is no idea of fighting, so to speak, a guerrilla warfare against the Germans, but they are, in the end, every ghetto and every resistance fighter is on his own. So this is why I think it's fair to speak of resistance by Jews and not so much about Jewish resistance, but we can discuss this. On the other hand, this means that what I want to show when I write about Jewish resistance, resistance of Jews, this I will understand very broadly. So I'm not talking about the definition of the perpetrators, and you have to say that actually the Nazis had a very broad idea of Jewish resistance, and they actually feared Jewish resistance. But although I want to show this fear of Jewish resistance, and I want to integrate this into my narrative, I, for principal reasons, don't want to follow a Nazi definition. So, because this definition of Jewish, this Nazi definition, of course, in its core is very anti-Semitic. You have the idea of the Jews as being a dangerous race, so every proud Aryan has to fear the Jews because they endanger their own race. And this is because this is why the Nazis feared Jewish resistance. But obviously you don't want to follow this definition. So one has to reflect about the idea what to call Jewish resistance, and you have to reflect that not in the way Israeli scholars did that in the 60s and 70s, but in a way that it makes sense to a German audience and to German scholars who are not familiar with the particularities of discussions of Jewish resistance, the particularities of all those Jewish political and religious groups, especially in Eastern Europe. So I think I don't want to debate whether escaping a ghetto actually means betraying resistance, and I don't want to debate whether for the purpose of resistance, it may actually be allowed to kill Jews. This is something I want to show as a debate inside the ghettos, but I don't want to debate it for the purpose of my book. This is something that has to be understood as a discussion at the time. It's not a question for the definition of today's historian. I'm talking about a historical perspective, and I'm not talking about morale. So Jewish resistance, the resistance of Jews will be, for my purpose, active individual and collective agenda against the Nazi norms, against the norms under occupation, against Nazi politics. And I will I will also look at the goals, why this resistance was conducted. And obviously, one goal is to protect lives. The other can be to protect dignity, to protect individuality, and to protect Jewish culture. So this, however, leads me to the problem that one should probably not define survivors of the Holocaust as resistance fighters if this is not their own perception. Many survivors didn't see themselves as resistance fighters, though they resisted. I mean, they survived. Survival means that actually they did something against one of the central political state goals of Nazi Germany, which is murdering Jews. And one might argue that actually survival already is resistance. On the other hand, I would say that resistance does also mean changing, or the will, the idea, the interest to change this existing politics, to make a difference. So it's more than just escaping it. And so this means why I don't want to have a look at as individual escape, individual hiding. For the purpose of my book, I won't consider it as resistance, but a collective escape, organized escape, helping others to escape, that for sure is resistance. So this book will aim at the synthesis. You will have understood that by what I said so far. And this will also show the German reader Jewish and specific Eastern European traditions that were an essential motivation for the actors, for the resistance fighters, which in Germany is hardly known and so has to be explained. The book will show many heroic deeds and heroic histories, but it will contextualize these histories. And we have to show that the development of Jewish resistance started in 1933. It started in Germany with the German Jews, and it evolved until 1945 in reaction to a ever increasing lethal German politics. So this German politics is some, if you like, basic narrative that has to be, well, that's always there. It has to be the fundamental idea for understanding Jewish resistance in my mind. And I don't want to ignore it just for the purpose of showing even more spectacular, heroic individual deeds. The book will reflect on the options, on the possibilities, the alternatives in a ghetto, in a camp, because this shows why resistance on the one hand is extraordinary, but on the other hand is something that is actually being conducted by many of the people in ghettos and in camps. And also this discussion will show the many nuances and inner rivalries of the Jewish groups that also existed. As I said, resistance is not a unanimous act, but resistance is something that can be very different and that is discussed already during the war. The book will also show that resistance is to a large part influenced by the factual and perceived actions of the non-Jews, the local gentry. Well, basic example, if you have an uprising, do you get help? Do you expect help by Poles? This influences resistance. It influences the idea of whether you can lead people outside a ghetto. So again, this has to be integrated in the narrative because it's important for understanding Jewish resistance. And in the end, and this is most important, this is of central importance, to make clear that everyone, from child to a senior man of 80, everyone, every victim had its own agenda. They all acted actively, and they were not just passive. No one was actually passive. I mean, very few actually took up guns. I mean, where should they get guns from? But, and it's fair to say that this did not even necessarily increase your chances of survival. Still, they acted, and they acted against Nazi politics. And because this is so important to show that everyone acted, I want to give my book the title, which will translate into ordinary heroes, Jewish resistance against the Holocaust. And by ordinary heroes, I obviously refer to Browning's Ordinary Men, which is about Germans. And here I will speak about ordinary Germans, ordinary heroes. And these are the Jews in the ghettos. And I want to show that what they did, how they acted, that action against or in the face of genocidal violence is rational and is understandable. And I think it's fair to say that what actually would have to be explained is why the Germans so willingly conducted a genocide, but this is a different book. My book will be arranged chronologically. I will have a focus on Eastern Europe, because from there we have 5 of the 6 million dead of the Holocaust, and there we have most of the resistance. But of course, I will integrate Germany before 1939. I will have Western Europe. I will only have, and you may disagree, so just let me know. I'm very interested in what you think about it. I don't want to integrate those Jews that were in national resistance groups, so Jews in the resistance in France, because this is, I mean, they were then part of the French resistance. And I don't want to integrate what happened outside of occupied Europe. So the activities of Joint or the Yishuv or whatever they did, which is important to the resistance group in occupied Europe for sure, but I don't want to go into detail here simply because the space is limited. And then, of course, in the end, to kind of summarize the book, I will look at the idea why understanding or getting an idea of the resistance is so important for understanding today's Israel commemoration politics. And I will address the question why this is such a blank spot in German Holocaust commemoration. So let me check, do I still have some time left? Yes, can I go on for a little bit?
You have 5 minutes.
Okay, very good, very good. That's about, that will be about it. My book will address German readers. It will also address German scholars, German researchers at universities. I think also about the historical education, for instance, in German memorial sites. These memorial sites, they show the victims and they invite visitors to identify themselves with victims, which is a bit without an alternative because you don't want to invite them to identify with perpetrators. And they show the victims in camps, but very rarely do they show victims as active people, as people with an agenda, but they are shown as passive victims in the camps. So this will have to change, but I think there is more to it. There are some research perspectives that I also want to offer. That is, first of all, the role of women in resistance, and you were just speaking about that there is a forum on women during the Holocaust, and I think it's of crucial importance to show that Jewish resistance or the active agenda of Jews during the Holocaust is something that's common to men and women at the same time and at the same amount, and that women are active, well, just like the men are, which is unfortunately still something that is not perceived that way. Then we will, which also leads to the idea that resistance is more than almost military action. Resistance goes beyond military action. So with this idea, I will follow Tsvetan Todorov, and he speaks about that there is the everyday ideas of taking care, of dignity, and so on. And there is heroic deeds without a primary purpose, which is just aiming for an idea, for a symbol. And this orientation towards heroism leads to uprisings. And it's a leitmotif of historiography, of remembrance, but this also leads to the fact that many female heroes are not present in historiography. They are diminished, they are marginalized. And then in the discourse, I think this is a bit ironic, this on the other hand is interpreted that way, that men are seen as protectors and as active defenders, while women are reduced to a mere metaphorical and symbolic role. So the problem is that in both interpretations, women are marginalized, and this is not appropriate if you look at the role they actively played in the ghettos and in resistance. So, ordinary heroes and heroines. A second research perspective, and I'm almost done here, I will have a look at resistance from a transnational perspective. We have to be quite aware that resistance by Jews is something that goes far beyond the new borders introduced by the Nazis. And Jewish resistance is, well, in close contact, and they are cooperating with non-Jewish resistance groups. This is not always an easy cooperation, but it is very important if you want to get an appropriate perspective on the conditions under which Jewish resistance was actually possible. And as a third research perspective, I want to show Jewish resistance as a kind of asymmetric warfare. So on the one hand, there's the question whether or in what way a guerrilla warfare was at all possible under the very specific conditions of the persecution of Jews. And on the other hand, it's about the question why the cultural resistance and the upkeep of ideas of Jewish traditions, Jewish religions, Jewish education, Jewish culture is of crucial importance if you want to be at all able to have a resistance, because there is nothing worth fighting for. Why resist at all? And this is why cultural resistance is so important. Okay, I will not talk you through my suggested outline of the work. I think I have said enough, and I do really look forward to your comments. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for a very fascinating lecture and fascinating subject. It opens a window to look at the resistance in really different ways, especially for a German audience. And I think your book is it has a added value, and I am looking forward to read it. So if anyone wants to ask questions, please, the floor is yours. The audience, please.
Okay,
yeah.
I have a question for you. Thank you for a really, really interesting talk. And what always interests me is the human side behind the research. What drew you to this topic? There are so many different things that you could do. What made you decide that you were going to focus on this?
Oh, this is a very good question. And I must say, Leah mentioned that briefly, that I started with German perpetrators, and I was really interested in why actually ordinary Germans found it so normal to conduct this genocide, to be, well, if not active murderers, then at least supporters of it. And I wrote a book on it, and then on everyday life, and I got some answers and some more questions, and then I asked myself whether this might be a German tradition, and I looked at the German occupation of Poland in World War I and found that there are very, very big differences, and that this is not a predecessor, but that this is something really different. So again, more questions, but also a lot of answers. I then wrote a book about Aktion Reinhard, which is the very core of the Holocaust. And in the end, I thought I'd learned a lot about the Germans, and I thought I want to learn more about the victims, but not the victims from a passive side, not the victims as just being the dead corpses, but about, well, the life of the victims. And that's why I decided to do Jewish resistance. And I very soon found out that there is actually nothing that really exists in German. There is an abundance of literature, obviously, in English. There's something in Polish. Unfortunately, I can't read Hebrew, but there's nothing in German.
Okay.
Thank you. I think Yaakov, Dr. Yaakov Falkov, this is your subjects too. You are dealing with resistance, and I know that you have articles that are saying that the Jewish people was the most people that resist, yes, more than others. You would like to add something, Yaakov? Yaakov? Froze. Yaakov?
This is frozen.
Yes, frozen. Yes.
Frozen.
Maybe it will come later. So maybe somebody else would like to ask question. Yes. Who is here? Okay. So I would like to ask you how you are German, yes? And as a personal question, how do you see the resistance of the ordinary people? Do you see them as heroes, as you said, the name? Yes, but you define heroism not as a collective, but as survival. Am I right?
No, I wouldn't say that survival is already heroism. Not surviving per se is heroism, but the actual well, how they. So I mean, survival, not that you're alive at the end of the war. That's not what makes heroism. Heroism is that you live under the conditions of a ghetto, that you have your children and you care for them and you try to make them also survive, that you actually try to remain a human being and not just a passive sheep led to the slaughter, that you say, well, I go to school, I go to a synagogue, or I try to set up a minyan and have some prayer. I go to a theater, or I act in a theater. I try to find my bread just to be able to eat. All this requires so much energy, and all this requires many of these actions are actually really dangerous. but still, I mean, they all did this. That in the end, 6 million died is due to the totality of a genocide, but it does not diminish the heroism and the activity of all those who still, I mean, no one voluntarily died. They all tried to avoid that.
But you know, I meet a lot of Holocaust survivors, and when I ask them, how come you survived? Many of them said, it was luck. It was luck. And in my eyes, everyone is a hero, yes, who survived in such horrible condition. He is a hero in my eyes. So when you take the Holocaust survivor, everyone, the fact that he survived, he resists because they didn't want him to leave. So if he survived, so this is some kind of resistance, and in my eyes, heroism. So
yeah, no, I mean, I think we're on the same page here. Maybe what I tried to make or to elaborate as a difference, I failed due to linguistic abilities. So I would say that the process of surviving is heroism, not having survived. I mean, having survived is also, to a large part, is luck. I think this is quite true. But the process of surviving 5, 6, or for German Jews even longer years of persecution, this is heroism. Yes, but it's the mere fact of being alive is not heroism, but the process of surviving, that's heroism. Well, maybe it's a very artificial.
Yes, we have here some in chat. Yaakov wanted to say, and also Veronica. This is Yaakov. Okay, Yaakov.
So please, probably ladies first, Veronica. And
Veronica? Veronica, yes.
Yes, I'm here, but maybe Yaakov, you are first, please.
Okay, whatever you say. So good evening again, everyone. First of all, Professor Lendstedt, thank you very much for your excellent presentation, which is fascinating, really fascinating. I think that you are doing a very important work. The topic is very interesting and very important, especially now. I would like to add only actually one thing. Have you seen this book, Fighters Across Frontiers, Transnational Resistance in Europe?
No, I've not yet seen it. I will.
Okay, we've published it in England last year in Manchester.
Okay.
In Manchester, UP. Actually, it is based on a very interesting project, in which I was actually a member, one of the leading members, for 5 years. And here you will find many examples of the phenomena which you called the resistance of the Jews and also the Jewish resistance. And of course, it is broadly speaking about the transnational dimension of the resistance and about the many different linkages of Jewish resistance and of Jews at all to different resistances across the European continent. So it could be and probably will be of use to you. And more than that, if you would like, and only if you would like, it will be a great honor of me to present you to our forum. We're still interconnected between us, different researchers across Europe and in the US, and probably they will have some insights helpful for your research on this many topics connected to the Jewish resistance in Europe and especially in Eastern Europe. I myself, as Dr. Ganor rightfully mentioned, I myself wrote some papers and topics in different books about the participation of Jews in different partisan movements, especially in the Soviet Union, including those who came from the Soviet Union to Poland since 1943 as a part of the much broader Soviet communist partisan movement. And there is also in this specific book, which I showed you now, there is a topic which deals specifically with the participation of the Jews in the communist networks, resistant networks in occupied Poland. So yeah, okay. So if you would like, I will be happy to stay in contact afterwards and to exchange ideas and probably contacts.
That
so
would
thank
be
you very
brilliant.
much.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. That's just why I presented here, because I need inspiration and help and any good ideas I can get.
This is the purpose of our forum.
Yes,
to share ideas, to meet colleagues, to talk. Yes, Veronica.
Yes, thank you so much. And it's so nice to see you all during this meeting. And thank you so much, Stefan, for your presentation. I think we've met once in Berlin during some workshop, and I'm happy that you are dealing with the resistance right now, because this is also the topic of my research. I'm doing research on the resistance in Białystok ghetto, especially.
Oh, mm-hmm.
And I did interviews with Holocaust survivors who were in the network, let's say, in the Jewish fighting organization during the war in Żop, Żydowska Organizacja Bojowa, but also in the surrounding of Białystok area. So I'm very much interested in this topic. And as far as I understand, you also read in Polish, right? Exactly. So for sure you know this publication, but I will send it in the chat so you can all see. These are two books by Dariusz Libionka and Lawrence Weinbaum, and the second one by Grzegorz Kołacz. And then they are all referring to the resistance issues that are important publications of last of recent years, and I'm sure it would be good to refer to this literature as well. And maybe the main issue I got from your presentation, I see that I wonder what would be in 2 sentences your definition of resistance, because I see here important issues. Yes, the issue of heroism and the issue of resistance and the relation between these issues. And I tried to make some kind of definition based on your talk, what is actually the resistance, because you made a lot of points, and I still try to understand how you would like to organize it within your book, because you referred also to cultural resistance, and for sure you know that the work by Rachel Brenner and the writing as resistance, and of course the underground archives in the ghettos and so on. So there are many issues, and I wonder, would you like to refer to the armed resistance as something separate phenomenon, or would you like to somehow refer to it as different topics? And how would you like to to describe this very complex issue, because we refer to different layers and different phases of this phenomenon? So still the question, what do you mean by resistance, is still relevant for me for now.
Yes. So thank you very much.
We have 5 minutes.
Okay.
For ending this session.
Okay. In general, my definition of resistance, I want to describe Jewish resistance as active individual and collective action against the given state, Nazi order, or Nazi politics. So, and with the aim of preserving life, but also dignity, individuality, and culture. So yes, this is very broad. And I get the problem, I fully get the problem of well, this discussion is probably since 1945. They are discussing what is Jewish resistance, and famous conferences in Yad Vashem. And I kind of try to escape this problem by going for a chronological perspective. And if you like, this means that I can include cultural resistance, but it also means that this is, so to speak, a first stage. And then there is a second stage, which means organization, or actually organizing resistance groups. And then we have a third and a fourth stage that is then the active fighting, the uprising. This would be the third stage. And then we have actions in the fourth stage, which is something you might describe as kind of desperation. That is the uprisings in death camps, the uprising of the Sonderkommando in Auschwitz. And so I try to get it all, not to ignore anything. But the main difficulty is probably that there is not enough space, or that there happened so much.
Thank you. Veronica, you got an answer for your question?
Yeah, I mean, does that?
I think it's more about the discussion, but you, also you mentioned that you will be working chronologically, yeah, in your book, and of course the uprising, for example, is simultaneous to organizing the underground archive. So I guess this is maybe more. So I wonder, how do you try to touch upon?
Yeah, but I mean, I think it's fair to say that Oneg Shabbos, for instance, I mean, they started working well before the uprising. So if you do it chronologically, I mean, of course, they continue their work, and at some point they say, well, we have to dig our archives. Of course, that's true. But in the end, it means that I still can do it chronologically.
Yeah, no, definitely, yes. Just maybe it's important to mark some issues, because, for example, the underground archive of Białystok Ghetto was actually initiated and has started only after the uprising in the Warsaw Ghetto, and before the uprising in the Białystok Ghetto, of course. So
okay, no, that's
some dynamic.
You are quite right, and the problem is that, of course, we have different layers in the West and in the East, and that this is all, I mean, it's all terribly complicated. And but that's probably why you have to write the book first, and then the book will offer then some clarity that in reality never existed. I mean, in a way, we all construct history, and we can't do it. We can't do it without compromises, and this is some compromise I will have to find. And I must say, with these four stages I just elaborated on them. This is a very old idea, and I think it was Josef Kermisch who first came up with these four stages. But he clearly had Eastern Europe in mind, and he did not think about France or Hungary. So yeah, it's very complicated, and I don't yet have a solution. I will try and hope that I find some more clarity.
Okay, so Judy, I know that you have another Zoom in New York, so thank you again for everything.
Thank you. I apologize that I have to leave. I just got a phone call that I'm already late for my Zoom in New York, and I look forward to hearing from all of you when we send out our call for papers for the book from the Poland Forum. Thank you again, and thank you for a fascinating lecture, and see you all in our next Zoom. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Judy. And we have another question here. Rivka, please. Yes, you're on mute.
Okay, you hear me?
Yes,
yes. Okay.
Louder, a little bit, louder.
Okay, one moment. Thank you very much, Dr. Lindstadt, for a very informative discussion. I'm curious if you've taken into consideration the many Jews who fled east you know, very often into the Soviet interior, such far-fetched places such as Siberia and Uzbekistan. How does that population factor into this question of resistance? Does, you know, fleeing? I mean, how would you categorize this population? Of course, a significant proportion of Polish Jewry, this is how they survived the war. Does fleeing mean, you know, does that negate resistance, or can that work in sync with resistance? Have you considered that at all?
Yeah. This is a very important problem, and this was, I mean, this disguising in the Soviet Union is a very important topic, and I only recently had a master thesis written on an example of this of someone fleeing to Dnipro and Dnipropetrovsk, and Dnipro being also conquered. So for the purpose of my book, I must say I will mention that this exists, but not more than that. Mm-hmm. Just for the reason that in the end, I have to write some 300 or 350 pages. So I unfortunately can't elaborate on it. I will mention that, and this is why I say, well, of course, escape is crucial act during the Holocaust, crucial for survival. But unless we don't have groups who actually organize flight, I won't elaborate on them. I will mention that there are many individuals fleeing individually, but that's about it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Leah, may I add something very short?
Yes, and then the last one.
Yeah. But of course, Rivka, to your question, but of course, when we are talking about Western countries like Belgium and Holland, we have actually many escape routes, and actually and also in France. And here again, in this book, you may find a very fascinating new information about those routes. So here, while talking about Western Europe, yes, we definitely are talking about a kind of resistance, a very important one. Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Professor Stefan Landstadt. You open again, as I said before, a window to discuss and to share knowledge. And here we have the best people that we can really cooperate and share knowledge. I hope that you will send a paper to the book that Professor Baumel-Schwartz talked about. And I hope that everyone here will send a paper, and then we will have a book of our Poland Forum. And I really wish that I will be able to organize a conference in Poland. And because I started to work on it, but there's the COVID situation, you know, it's really problematic. Veronica knows the situation in Poland. So it will not be, I suppose, this year, but I hope that next year we will definitely have a very interesting conference in Poland. I sent you all a call for papers for a conference in Poland in May that will take part with the collaboration with the GIG. I don't know if the deadline is already finished, but please send, and maybe if there will be some people from the Poland Forum that will participate in this conference, maybe I can organize another day in Krakow. I started to work on this, but I still don't know who sent a paper and whose paper was accepted. So let's see. And the organizer of the conference is also in our Poland Forum. Professor or Professor Glenn Dainer. So we had to be here today too, but I don't know, he's from the state, so maybe it was very early in the morning. So let's see. And I really, I don't stop to dream to have these forum meetings also in Poland. So Veronica knows that sometimes my dreams are coming true. It's not only dreams, but it's really happens. So again, thank you very much, and see you next month in the next meeting. Again, tomorrow, as I said before, in the beginning of the meeting, tomorrow we will have an opening ceremony, opening evening of the exhibition of Anders Army, of the Jewish fighters in Anders Army. And it will be very interesting. Many people wrote me that they have part, and I started to dig in this subject, and I found out that there are there were many Jewish doctors in the Anders Army, and their grandchildren are also doctors. So it's interesting, very interesting. And tomorrow we will have really, I feel sorry that I cannot have it on Zoom too, the opening, but we will have a lecture. I think in April, we will have a lecture about the Anders Army, so we can study this subject too. So if there is any questions, you can ask if somebody wants to add something. Okay, good. I see you wrote, and I see remarks. Deadline is December 20. Okay, Rivka. So if please send papers. So maybe we will have a meeting in Poland. And Stefan, probably you saw that Veronica wrote to you. Dear Stefan, good luck with your project. I hope we can stay in touch with regard to your project. Great. Rivka, thank you.
Yes, that would be great.
Interesting discussion. Yaakov, dear Stefan, many thanks again. We'll be happy to stay in touch. Of course, Eva. Hello, Eva, from Łódź. It looks great. It looks I am 1 hour late. Sorry, yes. We started like, it's 5 o'clock in Israel, I think 4 o'clock in Poland.
I'm sorry. I miss.
Yes. So next time, remember, it's 5 o'clock Israel, 4 o'clock Poland.
Okay,
always.
I will. Sorry. I thought Central European time, so my fault, my fault.
Okay, so thank you. And hello, Gil. Okay, so again, Stefan, thank you very, very much. And looking forward to your book.
Well, yeah.
To write a book, it's a long way, but even an article, it's a long way. So, but we have time. We are looking forward. Thank you, and have a nice evening. Bye-bye. Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
לאה, רציתי לשאול אותך משהו על מחר שלא הספקתי.
כן, רגע. רגע, אני מסיים את ההקלטה.
טוב.